Sure, Arkansas basketball has one SEC win to Missouri's 0, but believe it or not, I think the Hogs, Missouri's opponent on Wednesday, in much worse shape than Missouri. I'm going to explain why right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And let's get started today with some absolutely wild rumors being thrown around over at hogbeat.com. Yes, the rivals equivalent for Arkansas of PowerMizzou.com. And there's one reporter over there in particular, Jackson Collier, who I've followed for a few years now, who has a lot of good information about Arkansas and is about as credible as anybody out there to me. So it was a pretty big bombshell to me when yesterday Jackson Collier started talking about Eric Musselman not being the Arkansas basketball coach next season. So I want to get into that here in just a little bit. But you know what? It sounds like Trevon Brazile is likely done for the season. Believe it or not. He did not play the previous game for Arkansas. Sounds like he very likely will not play against Missouri tomorrow. Did not practice yesterday. So maybe this is just him ducking the Tigers, but it doesn't seem like it, if that's where your brain is going. It seems like, if anything, well, there's been some really wild rumors, quite frankly, on that very Hogbeat message board about Brazile, which haven't been substantiated by anyone that I'm aware of, including the aforementioned Jackson Collier. But I'll just say, based on Trevon Brazile's rather bizarre social media presence, which has been public, and his continued and unnecessary public feud with Missouri, it's safe to say that the Tigers dodged a bit of a bullet with this one, I would say. A guy who last season, after transferring obviously from Missouri to Arkansas, a guy with a ton of NBA potential, but man, has he lost a lot of steam now at this point. Obviously injury questions after tearing his knee up last season, but now I would say it's fair to just wonder about his mental state of being at this point. Honestly, how could you really even draft Trevon Brazile confidently if you're an NBA team at this point? I understand that it's 6'10" with plenty of explosive athleticism and a three-point shot in theory as well. There's plenty to like there in theory, but right now it is just a lot of theory, because so far Brazile's game has regressed in terms of shot blocking and rebounding. He's kind of a non-factor there, considering that 6'10" frame, and making 34% of your three-pointers, while nice, that's not exactly going to shoot you into the NBA lottery anytime soon. So if this is truly an injury-related thing, and he has to sit out for the rest of the season, well, then fine. But again, based on what Jackson Collier is saying, it sounds like he just wants to shut it down for the rest of the season, whatever exactly that means. Suffice it to say, not exactly getting a lot of great vibes out of Fayetteville right now. So, hey, Missouri primed to possibly actually win a game in the Southeastern Conference tomorrow in Columbia. Yes, truly, as Kevin Garnett once said, anything is possible, including the possible removal of Eric Musselman as coach this coming offseason. Now, I say removal. He's not in any danger of being fired that I'm aware of, but man, you look at everything that Jackson Collier, again, over at Hogbeat, part of Rivals.com, everything he put together here over the last couple days, and it sure makes a heck of a lot of sense when you realize that, oh, the J.B. Hunt transport family, the Hunts, as they're referred to via shorthand, down in Arkansas. Well, they're basically a big money type family that is big boosters. They've started an NIL collective, and well, they were as big a reason perhaps as Eric Musselman. Certainly they were a team that helped bring a lot of those big name freshmen, including Trevon Brazile, by the way, in the transfer portal. Word was, rumor and innuendo anyway, that he got a pretty good amount of money to come to Arkansas. So on top of that, You've got all those freshmen coming in, big time glitz and glamour type freshmen that came in for Arkansas last season. But now, for whatever reason, it seems like there's a fissure between Eric Musselman and the Hunt family. And, well, it seems like Musselman is sniffing around, possibly on his way to Louisville, is the biggest rumor I've heard. And frankly, when you put all the pieces together, I'd almost predict that at this point, that Eric Musselman is the coach of Louisville next season. But there have even been rumors him sniffing around at Arizona State and Minnesota, that type of deal. So basically, if you're asking yourself, what in the world does this have to do with Missouri? Well, a couple things. Obviously, as I pointed out already, this is Missouri's opponent tomorrow, so that makes it incredibly relevant. It also gives you an idea of context. Yes, while Missouri's having a bad season in terms of on the court, a lot of people, I'm sure when I say, hey, this team still seems like they're together to me. They're still playing hard. It seems like the program is still on the right track. We've got recruiting on the right track. NIL, we're all together. You've got that cohesion right now in the basketball program. And despite a disappointing season, well, I think Dennis Gates and company still has most of the support of the fan base, certainly the support of the athletic department and the NIL infrastructure at this point. There haven't been any high school recruits in that ballyhooed Missouri class coming up here of 2024. None of them have wavered so far. So again, this is just giving you all some good context here about, hey, just because it seems like things are going badly for Missouri right now, well, it could be going a heck of a lot worse, because you think about what's happening, all that I've just laid out for you, that's happening in the Arkansas athletic department. This is Eric Musselman. This is a guy that, yes, while most Missouri fans find him irritating, off-putting, all of the above, the guy can definitely coach some basketball, and his results are undeniable. 2 back-to-back appearances in the Elite Eight, among other impressive accomplishments for Musselman. But he is a guy that has obviously moved around quite a bit. If I were him, boy, I would have tried to make it work at Arkansas. Again, you've got that NIL infrastructure. You've got a passionate fan base that comes out for basketball in a big money SEC conference. Really, you've kind of got all you want there if you're potentially a Razorback coach. But to me, going to Louisville, that's a bit of a risk. So while Louisville arguably has had even better success in the past than Arkansas, to me, Musselman, by burning these bridges here, has really made himself, he's really going to be now taking a big chance in his career that he was all the way on the upward trajectory. Well, it certainly has flattened out at the very least at this point. So hopefully all these factors are going to come together and Missouri finally getting a win in the SEC tomorrow in Mizzou Arena. And coming up, some quick thoughts on Corey Batoon, Missouri's newest defensive coordinator, and also D.J. Durkin, who ended up ultimately at Auburn, as was heavily rumored for the last few days. But it was confirmed that he was in Columbia for a visit as well. So let's talk a bit about Durkin and, of course, Batoon coming up here in just a little bit. But first, let me tell you about FanDuel Sportsbook. Happy Super Bowl to all of you Kansas City Chiefs fans in particular, but to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring, the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and, of course, placing some super bets as well. And, well, let's check out on that line. In fact, Kansas City 1.5-point underdogs. Can you believe it? They're never going to stop betting against Patrick Mahomes, are they? Hey, at this point, I can't bet against Patrick Mahomes either. Haven't done it all postseason, and I'm not about to start now. But regardless of how you're feeling about the upcoming Super Bowl, FanDuel has so many ways for you to end this season with a W or 2 or 3. Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which player will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. New customers join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thanks for making Locked On Mizzou your first listen every day. For your second day, check out Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. And you know what? I've done a little bit more research on Corey Batoon, but still have just not been able to find as much as I would like, quite honestly. There have been some other Missouri beat writers out there, bloggers, that kind of stuff, have had their own takes, but, you know, again, I feel like an idiot simply just repeating whatever they say. So again, trying to get my eyeballs on some real tape of South Alabama here the past couple seasons. But one thing we do know is that Batoon is going to run some 3-3-5. I shouldn't say going to. In the past, he has run some 3-3-5. In other words, 3 down linemen, 3 linebackers in to go along with that nickel package in the secondary, as opposed to, well, exclusively, basically, Missouri ran a 4-2-5 on your standard downs last season. So a slight difference there at times. Now, Batoon certainly ran some 4-2-5 as well, but he just showed more of a willingness to be a little bit more multiple in terms of, hey, I'm going to take out a lineman, an edge rusher, bring in that third linebacker. Sort of like Kansas State has done for the past few seasons. Obviously, Missouri saw that 3-3-5 up close and personal the last couple seasons. Now, one thing I thought was interesting, another thought that I saw online that I don't totally buy into, but because Batoon is a relatively, perhaps, at least compared to early 40s Blake Baker, early mid-30s Kirby Moore, a relatively old coordinator at 55 years old. And some thought that, hey, maybe that means there's a chance that he sticks around a little bit longer. But honestly, who knows? I'm skeptical about that, as I just said. And if I'm Eli Drinkwitz, all I'm really concerned about is 2024. Let's be realistic. As I've said 100 times on this program, coaches are mercenaries, especially the coordinators, especially the position coaches, for the most part. Unless you work for Kirk Ferentz at Iowa, well, the odds are you're probably going to be moving around quite a bit. You know, Gary Pinkel was a notable exception during his time as well. He had a lot fewer assistants moving around than you would have expected. So again, if I'm Eli Drinkwitz, I just don't think that how long the guy's going to stay around, I don't think that can realistically be a part of your calculation, because even if you think that, well, a year, 2 from now, circumstances can change so quickly. You never know what jobs could come available. I mean, my goodness, 3 months ago, did any of us think Nick Saban was going to retire? I honestly didn't see that one coming. It didn't completely shock me, of course, given that Nick is in his 70s now. But still, again, that caused a lot of dominoes to fall throughout college football. And speaking of dominoes falling, you know, Gabe DeArmond did confirm that D.J. Durkin was in Columbia, and frankly, it's a little bit surprising that it got to that point, and Durkin did not become the defensive coordinator at the University of Missouri. Now, just to recap, for those of you who may not be everyday listeners, D.J. Durkin, former head coach at the University of Maryland a few years ago. Recently, he's been the defensive coordinator at Texas A&M and Ole Miss as well. Well, for whatever reason, that didn't come to pass, and a few days later, maybe even a couple days ago, Durkin officially went to Auburn as their defensive coordinator. Sounds like quite possible old Jimmy Sexton, everybody's favorite college super agent, may have played Missouri and Auburn against each other to get the biggest deal he possibly could have. And hey, good for them. Fine and dandy. If Auburn felt like that's the move they needed to make, that's fine with me. And honestly, just on paper, I don't know that I would have had a gigantic difference in reaction between D.J. Durkin and Corey Batoon, whether Missouri would have hired one or the other, because you can break down their resumes and pick nits here and there, and also put plenty in the pro column as well as the negatives column. So to me, it's kind of a toss-up on how this is all going to go. I think, again, trust Eli Drinkwitz's judgment, because, again, once you get past the obvious names like, say, Jim Leonard or Jesse Minter or Bill Belichick or something, once you get past that, I think it gets down to a lot more your own kind of instincts and all that good stuff. To me, I trust Eli Drinkwitz's instincts right now. Earlier, I talked about, of course, Nick Saban's departure. A lot of dominoes there falling in the coaching world, of course, including Washington's coach moving over to Alabama. And speaking of Washington, well, part of the unpredictability and also, I think, the parity that is coming to college football obviously has the transfer portal's a big part of that. And in particular, quarterback transfers, being able to come and be immediately eligible. My goodness, what a difference and a new world that is. You think about Michael Penix at Washington. You think about Jaden Daniels at LSU, Bo Nix at Oregon. All three of those guys on three of the best teams in the country, certainly three of the best offenses in the country in LSU's case, no doubt about that. So to me, that unpredictability, that makes you have to hesitate as a fan before you start predicting anybody on Missouri's schedule this season outside of maybe some obvious games. But, like, for instance, Auburn, how can you just assume that Missouri's going to win that game? Well, obviously you can't. You don't know right off the top of your head how these guys are going to look, these new quarterbacks are going to look in new uniforms. And to me, that explains why quarterback is such a difficult position to evaluate at the NFL level, because in any sport, at any level of football, whether it's high school, college, or the NFL, but I think the farther you go up every level, this is even more the case. It's hard to separate a guy from his college offense. In other words, you can evaluate Brady Cook, for example, in this offense, but putting him in a different offense, you move him to Alabama, you move him to a different style of offense with different teammates, different play callers, different offensive line, well, it's going to look a little bit different. So, again, that's what makes it so difficult. Again, with Brock Purdy, for example, who is looking great for the 49ers, had he been drafted by, again, who knows? If he had been drafted by the Houston Texans, who knows what that would look like, just for example. And coming up, I think, obviously, a big concern for the Tiger defense next year is replacing Ennis Rakestraw and Chris Abrams-Drain. But while that's definitely true, I think they might be missed even more than we might imagine. I want to explain that coming up in just a little bit. But also, I know we come to sports to escape from some of the crazy realities of real life, but can we talk for just a moment about preparing for real life? According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in more than a decade. I can't imagine a worse feeling than if one of my daughters got sick while a supply chain issue kept them from the life-saving medication one of them needed. Thankfully, my family will be okay because of Jace Medical. The Jace case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, among others. This stuff could happen to any of us. Visit jacemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jacemedical.com and use offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. With Ennis Rakestraw these days getting a lot of first-round mock draft predictions at this point, including from notably Mel Kiper Jr. of ESPN, well, some Missouri fans have been wondering, hey, actually, I thought maybe Chris Abrams-Draine was the better player at corner in terms of coverage these past couple seasons. And while I wouldn't argue that Abrams-Draine is a bad coverage player whatsoever, in fact, my contention is I find it tough to kind of pick both of them apart. I think they were both equally important to Missouri's success on defense the past couple seasons. But I will say this, despite the fact that Abrams-Draine has definitely been the more durable player so far in his career, I think one thing maybe some Mizzou fans are overlooking is that it's not just about, of course, coverage, especially in this day and age, as Brian Smith and I talked about last week, which you everydayers will recall. Well, in the screen game, in the outside zone run game, you pitch it outside, run speed option. Basically, you get the ball to the perimeter as quickly as you can. And you know what? If you're a corner, you've got to be involved in making plays on the perimeter more than maybe you did back in Coach Prime's day, when Deion Sanders famously is probably the greatest pure cover cornerback of all time. He famously wasn't a big fan of helping out in run support either. Not exactly a willing tackler. Well, that's the thing about Ennis Rakestraw. Not only is he a willing tackler, he blows those screen passes up, not only by reading them at a very high level, but also aggressively attacking them. When he's got an angle to the ball and to wiggle past a blocker, man, he takes it, and he takes it aggressively. There's many, many examples of him just absolutely drilling guys basically behind the line of scrimmage for multiple yard losses, just wiggling around a potential blocker. So you got to love that aggression from Ennis Rakestraw. And while his coverage, I think, is the most part of it, is the majority of his favorable grade there, I think obviously him being able to play that screen game and the run game as well is a really, really big part of it. And you know what? Let's finish it out here. I want to been talking a lot about media lately. It's just been a fascinating topic. Just so many moving parts here in terms of media. And I think with Monday Night Raw, WWE Monday Night Raw going to Netflix, I just think that brings yet another big player into, while obviously pro wrestling is not a sport per se, it is a 52-week-a-year live television product, which does give it some similarities with sports. And what that tells me is that Netflix is probably a bit more willing to dip its toe into sports rights in the future. And as we've seen with the Big Ten, they've parceled a little bit of their properties out to Peacock. Their exclusive Saturday night game was on Peacock this past season. Well, we talked about the 8-game, the 9-game schedule potentially in the SEC. I saw a lot of fans commenting that, hey, we don't want the 9-game schedule. 8 games in the SEC, that's plenty. That's hard enough. Hey, fair enough. I can definitely see the argument for that. And I also don't love with a 9-game schedule that you would have an imbalance of home games and away games every season, regardless. I don't love that. I really don't. So there are certainly some arguments against the 8-game schedule. What I'm saying here is, to me, with Netflix dipping its toe in to live rights for all intents and purposes, well, that shows they're probably willing to dip their toe into sports too. And what better way than having an exclusive game on Netflix from the SEC? I think that's quite possible. If Greg Sankey is having trouble selling that property to Disney or his current partners, well, having a big money partner out there perhaps on the market now, this is all speculation on my part, but to me it makes all the sense in the world that someday, at the very least, the SEC could pull a Jimmy Sexton and use some leverage here, use Netflix's leverage at the very least. Now, one thing that would be nice, if someday we get rid of, not that cable's going to totally die over I'm not necessarily predicting that, but if in fact one day all of these Missouri televised games are all on some streaming service instead, here's my question. Would we then no longer be slaves, for lack of a better term, to the TV schedule? In other words, a lot of times these Missouri basketball games during the week will start at 6 or 8 o'clock so we can cram in a doubleheader, basically. Well, my question is, isn't that kind of old thinking? Isn't that thinking from a decade or so ago, when a lot more people would just sit down, turn on their satellite, turn on their cable box, flip through the television, and perhaps just stop on the SEC network to whatever the college basketball game happened to be on at that time? Well, from my experience, and not only just my own personal viewing habits and consumption habits, just watching everybody else, including my parents' generation, and even more to the point, the generation below me, do any of those people watch double headers of college basketball anymore? No, I think what they do watch, though, obviously, is Missouri games. And if that's the case, if your audience is really just watching their games, whether you're a Missouri fan, you're an Auburn fan, you're a Maryland fan, whatever the heck it is, you're probably just watching those games, especially when it comes to college basketball these days. Well, if that's the case, then what are we doing here? Just start all the games at 7 o'clock then. Make it the most convenient for your viewers and especially the live attendees. I realize the live gate, the live amount of money that you're actually bringing in compared to the television money is negligible at this point in time. But at the same time, you know what makes a lot better television product? A full house of people that are excited to be there and making noise and all that good stuff. That's certainly one thing WWE has taught me over the years. I'll promise you that. But you know what? Thanks to you, speaking of the audience, thanks to you for being in this audience once again. Thanks for making this show your first listen every day. And of course, for your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today for the first ever national sports 24/7 show on YouTube. That's Locked On Sports Today. So until next time, and I'm going to have, yes, a preview of the game of the year tomorrow, Missouri and Arkansas. Get excited, ladies and gentlemen. So until next time, I'm John Miller, and this has been Locked on Mizzou.